Stories of mysterious abductions have existed for decades, to the point where they have become a significant part of Western culture. Unfortunately, this has overshadowed many of the subtle details surrounding these events, including strange occurrences that happened before, during, and even after the abduction. Perhaps it is finally time for people to listen to what truly happened to those who have experienced being taken in the dead of night.
Since the 1961 case of Barney and Betty Hill, alien abduction stories have followed a largely predictable pattern, featuring flashes of light, lost time, and eerie, dreamlike recollections of medical procedures and experiments. While skeptics argue that these similarities suggest fabricated stories, believers assert that the consistency of these details across numerous accounts points to something real. However, as these stories have been retold over the years, many of the finer details have been lost, leaving only the broad strokes intact. To truly understand these experiences, we must go back to the individuals who claim to have lived through them. For many who report extraterrestrial encounters, these events are not isolated but recurring. Some speak of a deep sense of dread or paranoia leading up to an encounter, coupled with feelings of restlessness and repetitive behaviors, such as repeatedly locking doors and windows. One abductee compared this to how animals behave when they sense a nearby predator. Even stranger are the frequent reports of bizarre auditory experiences, like ringing, beeping, or clicking sounds that seem to come from nowhere. When these individuals ask others if they can hear it, they often find that the sound exists only in their minds. In addition to strange sounds, other senses often seem affected, with many reporting an overpowering smell of sulfur or a strange vibration that seems to ripple through their bodies. Some also describe poltergeist-like phenomena, such as objects moving on their own or electrical devices malfunctioning. The presence of these phenomena challenges the tired stereotypes of inebriated witnesses, often applied to those who have had such experiences. In reality, many who have gone through such encounters report a lingering sense of vulnerability, as if their safety can never be guaranteed again. The following accounts were sent directly to Bedtime Stories, representing first-hand testimonies from those who claim to have survived these harrowing experiences. One such individual, who goes by the pseudonym Joe Keel, wrote about an experience he had in 1989 when he was studying at Bristol University in England. He recalls waking up around 2 a.m. lying on his stomach, but suddenly realizing he could not move. At the same time, he became aware of a heavy pressure pushing down on him, as if something was holding him down. He had a large TV across from his bed, an old CRT that his parents had given him when he went to university. Its massive screen reflected the faint glow of streetlights outside, acting almost like a mirror. It was then that Joe's tired eyes focused on a dark, unfamiliar shape sitting on his back. The figure was small, roughly the size of a child, but clearly not human. Its head was disproportionately large, and its body was far too thin. Suddenly, Joe saw a flash of movement, followed by a reflection of large, almond-shaped eyes staring back at him. The figure had turned its head and was now looking directly at him through the mirror. A strange grating sound followed, and Joe, horrified and paralyzed, watched as the TV slowly began to rotate on the dresser. After several moments, it turned far enough so he could no longer see the creature in the reflection. Then, without warning, he felt a sharp pain in his back. Moments later, he lost consciousness. When Joe awoke the next morning, he felt groggy, almost as though he had been drugged. He waited, expecting the drowsiness to pass, but the fog in his mind stubbornly remained. Hoping a shower would help clear his head, he went to the bathroom. There, as he undressed, he noticed a small, red triangular mark on his back. When he pressed it with his finger, a sharp pain radiated outwards. It was fresh and still tender. This discovery unsettled him. Though he had hazy memories of the strange creature from the night before, he had initially brushed it off as a bizarre dream. After a shower, he returned to his room and found that his television had moved. Joe insisted in his email that he had never experienced sleep paralysis before or after the incident. He also stressed that the physical evidence, the mark on his back, and the moved TV suggested that what he had experienced wasn't merely in his imagination. As unsettling as Joe's story is, it pales in comparison to the experience of Kevin Jones and his then-girlfriend CLA in the early 2000s. The couple experienced a series of unexplained events that culminated in a terrifying encounter. Kevin, a native of Wisconsin, recalls that he started noticing strange happenings a full week before the actual event. It all began one day while he was working in his home office. As he looked at his computer monitor, he noticed a small black figure standing at the edge of his peripheral vision. When he turned his head, the figure disappeared. Though a single occurrence could be dismissed as a trick of the mind, Kevin experienced this multiple times throughout the day. Whether he was moving around the house or engaged in different activities, he would suddenly catch sight of the same figure out of the corner of his eye. But whenever he tried to focus on it, the figure would vanish. Kevin assumed it was all a result of fatigue and promised himself to get more sleep. However, one night he mentioned it to CLA and was shocked to find that she had been experiencing the same thing. Neither of them could shake the feeling that they were being watched. Over the next week, things grew worse. Pictures fell from walls and objects fell off shelves, even though no one was near them. Twice, the couple returned home to find their sofa cushions rearranged into strange pentagon shapes on the living room floor. Their frequent jokes about the house being haunted soon took on a more sinister tone. One night, while they were both sitting in the living room, CLA watching TV and Kevin reading a book, Kevin suddenly heard a metallic beeping sound, as if someone were tapping Morse code. The sound was bizarre not only in its nature but also in its origin. Kevin swore the noise came from inside his head, as if it was emanating from the center of his brain. Moments later, CLA looked at him, asking, "Did you just hear that?" Both were confused, unable to determine where the sound had come from. Oddly, their two dogs didn't react to it at all. The couple went to bed, but the following morning both felt as though something was amiss. CLA complained of a sore spot just below her navel, while Kevin was overwhelmed by a sense of unease and detachment. In the weeks that followed, both experienced vivid, disturbing dreams of strange figures. Eventually, the images became so intrusive that Kevin developed severe insomnia. As his waking life suffered, he visited a hypnotherapist to improve his sleep. When he told the therapist about the dreams, they became visibly concerned. In fact, the suggestion to undergo hypnotic regression was made. Reluctantly, Kevin agreed, and together with the therapist, they uncovered a chilling memory. On the night the couple had heard that strange metallic beeping noise, Kevin suddenly found himself jolted awake by an odd thud. As he opened his eyes, he immediately realized that he was lying on his back, completely paralyzed. He could see a dark silhouette standing at the foot of the bed. His heart raced as he glanced to the side, noticing that CLA wasn't lying next to him. The covers were pushed back, indicating that she had gotten up in the middle of the night. Then, Kevin caught a rustling sound. A second small figure appeared and moved away to the side. He tried to turn his head to confront the figure, but no matter how hard he tried, his head wouldn't budge. The paralysis was overwhelming. Suddenly, Kevin felt his body being lifted off the bed. As he was raised, His body rotated onto its side, facing the other black shape, but to his horror, the figure wasn't at the side of the bed anymore. Instead, it was moving slowly toward the bedroom door, walking out of the room. That's when Kevin saw her CLA was floating just above the floor, moving along with the figure, as though an invisible rope was pulling her. Like Kevin, she seemed awake, but she was completely immobilized, her face frozen in a look of sheer terror. Kevin's body continued to roll, floating over until he gently impacted the floor, now lying on his back, facing upward, just above the carpet. The figure that had been standing at the end of the bed began moving toward him. Kevin could feel his body being drawn toward the door, in the same way that CLA had been pulled. But there was something else. There was a third figure. This one was different from the first two. While the first two figures were entirely black silhouettes, this one had distinct features. Kevin, still paralyzed, could only move his eyes, darting desperately around to catch any clue about what was happening. He couldn't get a clear look at the third being, but he could just make out a small frame beneath a large, gray-colored head. The last thing he remembered was a blurred image of a strange face right in front of his own, staring directly into his eyes. Then everything went black. Neither Kevin, CLA, nor the hypnotherapist knew how to make sense of this revelation. Hypnotic regression, after all, is not an exact science. And although Kevin and CLA didn't stay together in the end, Kevin is still adamant that the experience wasn't just a dream. Manny, born in Germany in 1988, shared his story with us through an email. He recalled that when he was about 17 years old, his friend Amal would tell him stories about aliens. She claimed to have been in contact with extraterrestrials all her life. Manny, skeptical as ever, thought Amal was just a fantasist, but he enjoyed listening to her tales. One day, he jokingly asked her to describe what these aliens looked like. She said they were tall, slim with white skin, and often resembled humans, especially the females. Manny, laughing, told her to ask them to come visit him. He thought nothing of it and soon forgot about the conversation entirely. Then, one hot summer night in 2005, Manny was awoken by a strange buzzing noise. It was dark, but he immediately sensed someone else was in the room with him. He went to rub his eyes, but as he did, he felt a pressure on his hand, as though it was being held down. Suddenly, the pressure was released, and he looked down, just in time to see a spindly white hand moving away from his own, retreating into the shadows. His heart raced, and he spun around, turning on his lamp, only to discover that the room was empty. He was alone. Over the next few days, Manny had similar experiences. Finally, he told Amal that he didn't want to meet her alien friends and asked her to stop them from visiting him. After that, he never had another encounter. So what can we make of these eerie accounts? The first thing to consider is that all of them occur while the individuals are asleep, which lends some support to the skeptical view that they may be nothing more than hallucinations during sleep paralysis. Many of the symptoms describe being unable to move, feeling a weight pressing down on the body, and sensing a malevolent presence are common indicators of sleep paralysis. This condition occurs when the brain is caught between sleep and wakefulness, leading to vivid dreamlike hallucinations, while the body remains still and paralyzed. This could explain Manny's experience, except for one thing. He says that the paralysis was only momentary and only affected his hand. However, in the cases of Kevin and Joe, who were both completely incapacitated during their encounters, there was physical evidence afterward. For even the most skeptical, It's difficult to dismiss the appearance of injuries or the movement of objects in the room as just sleep paralysis. Moreover, what about the hundreds of abduction reports that occur when the person is not asleep, such as the numerous cases where individuals driving on desolate roads late at night have experienced similar phenomena? This leads us to a much deeper question: what if alien abductions aren't physical events at all? What if these beings are not from another planet but from an entirely different plane of existence? Could it be possible that the abductees aren't physically removed from their rooms, but instead, the experience happens purely in their minds? This theory could explain why proving these encounters is so elusive. If these beings can enter our minds, there would be little to no physical evidence left behind. It might also explain the internal noises and visions in Kevin's experience. The couple's dogs didn't react to the beeping sound because it wasn't happening in the physical world. Similarly, what if the marks on Joe's back and CLA's stomach weren't physical at all but were part of their vision, created by their firm belief that something physical occurred? Manifestations of this nature have been observed in other alleged supernatural phenomena, such as stigmata. It's also worth mentioning an experiment conducted by the team at Planet Weird, where they attempted an alien abduction in reverse. Instead of using regression, the hypnotist planted a suggestion in the subject's mind. The patient was a skeptic, not a believer. While in a suggestive state, the hypnotist described the subject lying in bed, noticing a light at the window, followed by a small figure appearing in the room. That was all. When the subject came out of the trance, he reported a full experience of being taken aboard a ship and examined, even after being told that the memory had been implanted. The subject remained utterly convinced the experience had been real. This raises further profound questions about the nature of these entities. Some theorize that the beings we call Greys may not be extraterrestrial at all, but spiritual beings or even demons. There are reports of abductees invoking the name of Christ, which instantly halts the experience, leaving them alone and unharmed. The scent of sulfur, a classic sign of demonic presence, is often reported during these encounters. It's also interesting that medieval depictions of demons closely resemble modern descriptions of gray aliens. Perhaps the reason alien encounters are so hard to prove is because they don't take place in the physical world at all. Instead, they could be happening in a realm where space and time, and perhaps even earth and hell, are not so firmly separated. One thing is clear: if these entities are indeed trying to infiltrate our world, there seems to be very little we can do to stop them. The visions, sounds, and sensations leading up to the actual abduction may simply be evidence of a weakening barrier between different dimensions. Once these creatures find a way through, they can invade our minds, tormenting us as we sleep. Are we looking for them in outer space when we should be searching within? It's hard to say, but one thing is certain: if these beings intend to invade our world, we might be helpless to prevent them.